Mansa Musa. The name carries the weight of legend. It is whispered in classrooms, echoed in documentaries, and debated in history books. But for centuries, the full story of Mansa Musa was hidden beneath the sands of time. He is remembered as the richest man who ever lived, but his story is so much bigger than money. It is a story of power, of faith, of diplomacy, and of an African empire that became the beating heart of the world. In telling this story, we begin to understand how one man reshaped history without firing a single shot. Mansa Musa was born in 1280 into the Keita dynasty, an old and noble family that had ruled the Mali Empire since its founding by Sundiata Keita. He grew up in a world where trade caravans snaked across the Sahara, where gold dust was measured in gourds, and where the Niger River served as a superhighway linking distant peoples. The Mali Empire was already wealthy, but it was also fragile and immense territory held together by alliances and tradition. Musa's early years taught him patience, discipline, and the delicate art of leadership. These qualities would later define his rule. Musa did not come to power through conquest or inheritance alone. He was appointed as deputy to Emperor Abu Bakr II, a ruler obsessed with exploration. Abu Bakr launched two enormous expeditions to cross the Atlantic Ocean. The first returned with tales of endless water. The second, comprising hundreds of ships, vanished completely. When Abu Bakr II failed to return, Musa was crowned Mansa. The word means King of Kings. He inherited an empire rich in gold, salt, ivory, and slaves, but also rich in potential. And unlike many rulers of his time, Musa saw himself not just as a guardian of wealth, but as a builder of civilization. Under his leadership, the Mali Empire reached its greatest territorial extent. It stretched from the Atlantic coast deep into the Sahel and beyond, touching lands that today form Mali, Senegal, Gambia, Guinea, Ivory Coast, Niger, Nigeria, and Chad. This was no mere kingdom. This was a superpower. Its lifeblood was trade salt from the Sahara, gold from bamboo and boar, cola nuts from the forests of the south. Mansa Musa presided over a trans-Saharan network that connected West Africa to North Africa, the Mediterranean, and the Middle East. The wealth was staggering. Modern economists try to put numbers on it for $100 billion, $500 billion, but the truth is that his riches were beyond calculation. His power lay not only in what he had, but in what he could do. In 1324, Mansa Musa embarked on a journey that would shock the world. As a devout Muslim, he undertook the Hajj, the sacred pilgrimage to Mecca. But this was no quiet spiritual retreat. This was a statement. His caravan included 60,000 people, soldiers, officials, merchants, and servants. 12,000 slaves each carried gold. 80 camels bore hundreds of pounds of gold dust apiece. He brought cooks, griots, and musicians. He turned the road to Mecca into a moving city, a display of African wealth and grandeur that no one had ever seen before. When Musa entered Cairo, the heart of the Mamluk Sultanate, he caused a sensation. He gave away so much gold to the poor, to merchants, and to the city's elite that the value of gold plunged. Inflation gripped Egypt for more than a decade. The chroniclers of the time could hardly believe it. They wrote of a king from the land of gold, whose generosity reshaped the economy of a mighty kingdom. Word spread through the Islamic world and into Europe. For the first time, Europeans began to imagine West Africa not as a distant mystery, but as a land of kings and treasures. On the Catalan Atlas of 1375, one of Europe's finest maps, Mansa Musa appears enthroned, holding a golden scepter and an orb. He is the only African king depicted on the map. His fame had crossed the seas, but Musa's pilgrimage was about more than spectacle. He met scholars, jurists, poets, and architects. He forged diplomatic ties. He observed cities like Cairo and Mecca, absorbing their lessons in administration and culture. When he returned to Mali, he brought with him a vision for a renaissance. He invited scholars to his court. He commissioned mosques and schools. He began to transform his empire from a trading power into a cultural and intellectual powerhouse. At the center of this transformation was Timbuktu. Once a modest trading outpost on the edge of the Sahara, Timbuktu became under Musa's rule a city of scholars. He expanded the Sankore University, turning it into a world-class center of learning. Thousands of students flocked there from across Africa and the Islamic world. Its libraries held hundreds of thousands of manuscripts on astronomy, medicine, law, mathematics, and theology. In an age when Europe was still emerging from the Middle Ages, Timbuktu was a beacon of knowledge. Musa understood that wealth without wisdom is fleeting. By investing in education, he gave his empire something that would outlast his own lifetime. Mansa Musa also reshaped the physical landscape of his empire. He brought back the Andalusian architect Abu Ishaq-i-Sahili, who designed the Djingueber Mosque, a masterpiece of Sahelian mud architecture that still stands today. He commissioned palaces, schools, and courtyards. He built roads and strengthened cities. He imposed fair taxation and created a bureaucracy to manage the empire's vast territories. He allowed local customs to coexist with Islamic law, balancing unity with diversity. His statecraft was sophisticated, blending religion and pragmatism in a way few rulers of any age have achieved. Despite his immense power, Musa's reign was marked not by endless wars, but by stability. He defended his empire when needed, but he was not a conqueror for conquest's sake. He was a steward. He recognized that the true strength of a state lay in its people and their learning, their faith, their productivity, and their sense of belonging. This is what made his empire not just rich, but resilient. Mansa Musa ruled for about 25 years. When he died around 1337, his son Magakita took the throne, though the Mali Empire would eventually decline under later rulers. Musa's achievements endured in memory and in material form in the mosques of Timbuktu, in the manuscripts preserved in hidden libraries, in the oral histories of the griots who still sing his name. His pilgrimage remained the stuff of legend. His generosity became a byword, and his example inspired generations of African leaders to think of wealth, not just as personal glory, but as a tool for communal uplift. Today, Mansa Musa's story is being rediscovered by a world hungry for the truth about Africa's past. For too long, history books written elsewhere ignored or minimized African achievements. But Mansa Musa stands as a towering counterexample. His empire rivaled any in Europe or Asia. His cities were centers of learning. His government was organized and effective. He was not a myth, not a fairy tale, but a real man whose decisions shaped real lives. To call him the richest man in history is both true and insufficient. His greatness was not measured in coins, but in vision. He built libraries where others built castles. He gave gold where others hoarded it. He sought wisdom where others sought war. He turned a pilgrimage into an advertisement for Africa's brilliance. He made Timbuktu the Oxford and Cambridge of its time. And he did it all in an age when much of the world had no idea such greatness existed south of the Sahara. Mansa Musa was the emperor who made the world look at Africa and see power, dignity, and potential. He was the king who turned gold into a legacy. He was a ruler who understood that leadership is not about what you take, but about what you leave behind. And what he left behind was a model of generosity, scholarship, and vision that still speaks to us today. So when you hear his name, don't just picture a man dripping in gold. Picture a leader who lifted an empire. Picture caravans crossing the desert, not to conquer, but to connect. Picture Timbuktu's libraries lit with oil lamps at night, scholars bending over manuscripts as camels groan in the streets outside. Picture a world where Africa was not a victim, but a center of gravity. That was the world of Mansa Musa, and that is why, centuries later, his story still matters. Mansa Musa the Emperor, who turned wealth into wisdom and a kingdom into a legacy that the world can no longer ignore.